You enjoy your coffee. Okay. Well, look, are there any other... thank you for responding to that and the other issues.
Just on that subject, though, we would like some direction as to whether or not you're comfortable with what's recommended in the sheet.
So the idea that I raised, so accept it.
There is always the potential. I guess the issue here is going back to the CJOG comments, the cross-government comments, and that we will continue to get, potentially in the statement of expectations, is the cost, unnecessary cost to development. Well, I don't know that it's as specific as that, but it is. So I'm putting it back to the people that are still here to give us some direction on this, because you've understood from David what the potential costs will be.
Okay, so I guess Leanne seemed to take a view before, just I like something along the lines that in fact we strengthen we take out the recommended bit and we just say that there will be, even though we know that in fact there's no actual requirement for that. Was that what she was sort of alluding to?
No, it wasn't.
What was she giving? Oh, okay. Tim.
Preferable for it to be painted blue, but we're not forcing it.
Well, that's the words. It is recommended blue.
Maybe then recommendation is a compromise. So we have that in though.
Okay. Well, that's what the recommendation is. That what's in bold there.
Yep. Recommendation is that we have it recommended.
Well, David just said there could be thousands.
One of the things we could potentially do, Mr. Chair, is to, as part of the assessment criteria, we could refer to the standards themselves for parking, because there is guidance on parking spaces, and that has the reference in there about blue being used, as recommended that blue being used. So it's not a rule as such, but it's an assessment criteria. So that would provide some direction to people who are looking to put these in, but it wouldn't be an absolute rule. So you'd avoid the unnecessary consent activity and perhaps the costs, but there would certainly be encouragement for people to do that, and it'd be one of the things that the council could assess an application against.
So Richard, is that in the criteria now? Are you suggesting that should be added to it?
So we could add it. We could add it as part of the integrated transport assessment. So it's those only those large activities, and we can assess it. There's no additional consent, and.
So if it was requiring a consent.
But realistically, who's going to raise a resource consent so that they can avoid painting a car park blue?
No, that's what we're saying. It would only catch those instances where a resource consent is necessary, and that's particularly on the integrated transport assessment projects.
No.
And we can come to the university parking rates. There's no change.
There's just one minor matter in between.
Yep, there is.
There was a question about non-slip surface and whether we should have a definition for that. We've had a look at the requirement further since yesterday. This was introduced through the LifeMark standards, and the LifeMark standards only require us to show that it can be adapted for a non-slip surface. I've got some requirements attached, which shows there's a page and a half on page 22 and page 23 of different surfaces that can be non-slip. So it would be quite easy for someone to comply with that because they can say that they'll put that in place when the need arises. So we're looking at removing that from the transport chapter, and it will be covered by the life mark standards in the residential chapter. So yes.
Yes.
Wet and icy.
Wet and
Wet
icy.
and icy was the
Yes.
term.
Yep. Yep.
So those pages that David referred to were in the bundle that you were just
Yes.
given.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Read that one.
Right.
And so university parking rates,
Yes.
you're suggesting no change, and thank you for the information on that.
Yep.
No,
Yeah,
That's
so what I was asked is provide some more information as to why we've proposed the rates that we've proposed. So the pages at the back, starting with Canterbury University parking requirements, outlines some of the reason why we're suggesting the rates we are. One of the reasons is that over recent years, Canterbury University is actually the number of people driving to, well, the number of students driving to the university has declined, and there's a lot more cycling and catching public transport. So the parking requirements. Yeah, so that's the last one that was done a survey, but we've also got census data since then, and the census data in 2013 shows an increase in cycling as well. So it's like this trend has continued. In Christchurch, there's actually been a slight increase in car use, but there's been that's more post-earthquake rather than a long-term trend.
This is a very big issue for all of the residents around the university, because it's like Memorial Ave. It's just absolutely chocker with cars. So they feel very strongly about this. But then what you do is when you go on to some of the sites on campus, for example, and I haven't checked it this year, on Dovedale campus up near Dovedale, Solway, Parkstone corner, there is a car park there, but with no means at all for anyone to be able to pay the car parking charge, which is just stupid. And so what would be really sensible, it's a very large car park, but there is, in theory, if you ask enough people, they tell you that you're supposed to walk to the cafe, which is some 600 metres away, get your car parking coupon, walk back to the car park, put it on your cart before you go and have your coffee, which is a really novel way of enforcing parking.
is this for visitors, Vicky?
Visitors,
Because
anybody.
presumably students have the fees are here for
No,
all year.
students don't always buy the $230 or $345 fee that they're required.
It's $1 a day, I've worked out, or
In
less.
fact, yeah, but their natural inclination, because they're supposed to buy it at the time they're paying their fees, is not to pay it because it comes as a bulk. So the idea of, $1 a day or $2 a day would be much more useful at some of those sites on Canterbury, but they don't have any provision for it.
So what I mentioned yesterday, and this is sort of contained in the second page, which shows the parking charges at the university. We don't have any legal ability to prevent the university from charging for parking. That's their economic right to make money off their land. So and the same occurs in the airport, and that's why we've got issues on Memorial Ave. So as I said, the district plan is only one tool to manage parking. It's not the silver bullet. There are lots of other tools, and in this case, a lot of the parking issues we have around the city are because people charge for parking, and obviously people choose to park on the street where it's free. So the only way we're going to solve that, because adding more parking spaces is not going to make it any cheaper, is to start charging for parking on street.
So what's your suggestion then, Vicky?
Well, they have off-street car parking,
Yes.
which you've included here as well. But it is completely.
Well, they are. David mentioned yesterday they are preparing a travel plan for the university.
Yes, yep.
And that would be the mechanism where we could encourage them to make better use of their car parks that they have. So that's something that they'd look to work with us on, and we've got a team of people upstairs. Well,
So Richard, can we also encourage them to make them more user-friendly then, so students don't have to walk?
I think that could be the mechanism for
So we encourage them to
raising
do
some
that?
of those issues.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that, and
No.
you know, if that's a problem, then it's something we can raise through.
Because what the other things that we were saying yesterday, Vicky, we wanted this to fit with the other parts of our cycling strategy, and like we've got the unicycle going in finishing off any day, and public transport use of that for that. You know, we want to encourage that too.
Totally no problem, but there is off-street car parking that cannot simply be used because
Yep.
they have to provide for them.
Yeah. Well, we can certainly raise that with them.
Yep, because the previous numbers were taken from a survey of a whole lot of universities, and that was sort of the average parking demand. The information that's now been provided by Canterbury University shows that the number of students that drive to the Canterbury University is a lot lower than a lot of other universities. Example of Waikato University, the location of it means that people come from far and wide, and there's a lot more people driving there. Yep. No. This is so it doesn't ask where did you park. It asks how did you get here. So whether you parked on the street or parked in the car park, it's the number of people who travel there, so Canterbury University is doing quite well in reducing the number of people driving, and obviously we're trying to encourage that by building the cycleway and the investment in public transport and that kind of thing. So.
Well, I suppose then the question, Yanni, is have you got a suggestion to the staff then that how that be done through the annual plan, apart from ask them nicely to make it more user-friendly? What else would you specifically want to have required?
The ratio. So I think the ratio that you had originally wasn't, whatever. What I don't understand is with the how much of the existing when they redevelop. Is that the real issue, or is it that they have?
I think the issue is we think the ratio reflects, will accurately reflect the numbers, the demand for car parking going forward, but what the district plan can't do is address that current issue, which is a retrospective one, where they probably haven't provided enough car parks up until now, and you've got lots of people parking on the adjacent streets. But the district plan, and we're comfortable that the ratio that David's put in the plan is going to pick up the number of the demand for parking that they'll use going forward.
Yeah.
But what it can't do is address the retrospective issue. So we can't kind of go to them, well, there's lots of people parking on the streets now, so therefore we need you to build a big parking building so less people do that. It's really about the development going forward.
It's 25.5 to be exact per 100 students. 25.5 happens to be the ratio.
For 100 FTEs, yeah. And a different one for staff, I presume.
Oh, that
That's
includes
captured
students
somewhere.
and staff.
Oh, that includes the staff
Yeah.
ratio, so that's the averaged ratio.
Yes.
How many car parks per 100 students?
Yeah, it's 25.5.
No, that's staff and students.
So those parks are for staff and students.
No,
It's
they're not.
based
Not
on the
at
number
Canterbury
of...
University, they're not. That's staff and that's students.
Well, okay. It's 20 parks per 100 students for visitors, and it's 5.5 for staff. So
5.5.
5 for staff, so that's how we get the 25.5
5.5 per
Per
100
100.
staff
per,
required.
per 100 students.
Sorry, so,
The ratio is based on the number of students, not on the number of staff.
okay.
Yeah.
So we assume 5.5 staff for every 100 students. This is obviously the philosophy department as opposed to any other department that we've based it on. But I'm wondering what we can do about it. Like, this would be, I would have thought, one of the areas that there would have been a lot of public comment about if people had realised that the number of car parkings at Canterbury University was being debated. Part of their deal with the government is that they need to increase the number of students by X thousand for locals and another X thousand for international students. And we know that their students are now much more dispersed post-quake than they were pre-quake. Have we built that into an enhanced parking requirement that they have to provide?
Well, the parking requirement is based on the number of students. So if the roll increases, then the parking requirement will follow. So it takes into account of that. There's always going to be a fine balance, and we've got some maps at the back if you want to read maps from transport models. But there's always going to be a fine balance between providing enough car parks and not providing too many that it encourages more people to drive, and then we have more traffic issues. And so we've just shown some of the maps. The red line, the wider the line, will be the more traffic you'll get onto these roads around the university if you require more car parks. So it's quite a complex sort of situation where we want to cater for demand, but we don't want to oversupply that we discourage people from cycling, discourage people from catching buses, and we add to more traffic. So it's a real sort of balancing act.
Thanks, David. It looks like we haven't got any kind of...
Right at the back.
It looks like we haven't got any sort of solution at the moment.
That's not entirely true in the sense that this is where we have to depend on the Section 32. We have to have robust argument as to why we're producing the objectives, policies and rules that are in the plan. What David has shown you is his reasoning for the ratio that's in the plan and for what's being suggested here in the plan. We can't anecdotally say just because people don't like car parks outside their houses, the road is a public area and people are entitled to park there. So we can't change the ratio on the basis of people not liking something necessarily. There has to be good, robust reason for doing that.
There has been at least 4 meetings with the university where this subject has been very robustly debated. Obviously not with the council because it doesn't involve the council.
On the basis of that ratio, yes.
And so they provide for that.
Yes.
Yes.
And does the
That's a good question about the way the current plan operates, because the interpretation that the interpretation of the current plan, the legal interpretation of the current plan, is that it's one campus, and so it doesn't matter where the car parks are, is still a car park. As for whether that's been addressed in the district plan review,
Certainly and it will have its own. They used to be called special zones. We'll be calling them specific zones. The university will be one of those, and we will be looking at those kinds of factors. We haven't done that work yet. That is part of phase 2 chapters.
But
Okay, so we'll come to it again. Us for the fact we are for it. So what I'm suggesting.
Well, no, this parking chapter doesn't.
yeah.
However, if there is seen to be a problem with it in that next phase, potentially we can do, as we've just decided we would potentially do with the natural hazards chapter. If there is a further indication as to why this should change, we would bring that to the attention of the hearing panel.
doing their new development. So we get one chance to do this. Can I just ask just a very quick question? The definitions on page 24, 20 spaces for 100 FTE students and 5.5 spaces for 100 FTE students. Is that right? It seems really confusing why you've got the two different ratios. And so I think you need to amend that. Yeah, it's a little bit unclear.
So yeah, the staff parking requirement is based on the number of students, because it's a formula that you have X number of staff per student. So that's the way it's been calculated.
But if you look at the top, staff and students are in one column and residents, visitors are in another.
Yeah.
So I do think there's probably an issue around just that table giving clarity.
So you like to clarify that part of it?
It's so you can, yeah, so it's 20 spaces for 100 students. No. For visitors, yes. Yes. Well, as I say, I mean, that might be a historical issue. We can't be retrospective on it. I know it's real now, but it was consented previously under different rules. For visitors and residents, obviously you've got halls of residents so you've got to take into account of those. From now on, and we can clarify. At the moment, we haven't counted them, but this is not retrospective. This is going forward.
I wonder if a way is that you sort those ratios, and especially ones around the visitors, and for our next district plan discussion, perhaps give us those figures. And I hope though we don't have to relitigate all this again. Is that a way forward, Vicky and Gianni? So we'll get the figures clarified and just present those, and hopefully we won't have to relitigate.
Those are the same numbers that we have in the current operative plan.
So is there no distinction between visitor car parking and staff and student car parking? Because they're
There is.
differentiated.
Yep. So we could have that part clarified.
Yeah. All the rules require is that the staff parks are marked differently. They don't require the student parks to be marked differently or the visitor parks to be marked differently. So they are at the moment, but that's not a district plan requirement. So
I think that's accepted, Vicky, but because the point has been made that it can't be done retrospectively. This is in the plan. I think, though, what is reasonable is that the ratios, that they be clarified, and the staff will bring them back to our next district plan meeting. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Buck, just before you go, you raised a question about the location of the car parking and how that works at the moment with parking at Dovedale, for example, being included within the calculation of total car parking required for students. If you do have a concern about the way that operates in the current plan, I think it's the transport chapter which is the place to address that rather than the special purpose university zone, because the interpretation of that car parking requirement comes out of the way one of those transport chapter tables operate in the current plan. So if you do have a concern about that you want addressed, I think now is the time to address it.
Well, I did say that for our next meeting we would come back to
We have
this.
addressed that. I'll
Okay?
clarify that.
I am, yeah.
It may not be for tomorrow, though. It may be as part of approving the whole plan. Because we don't have
Okay,
any
we'll
more
look
days.
out for it. I'm sure Councillor Buck and there's another
we'll-
councillor isn't here this afternoon,
We'll
but I'm sure they
certainly
will.
bring it back to you in one form or the other.
Thank you.